You're very welcome. 15th of June 2022 is The Beautiful Truth with Fintan Dunn reporting at 1 GMT, and it's a red letter day today because it's the day I finally get to look better than Justin Bieber. He don't look too bad there until you do the slow-mo and you see how bad it really is. Yeah, it's not good. And that's, of course, nothing whatsoever to do with the COVID vaccine. I'd like to reassure you of that immediately because, as Rolling Stone has reported, anti-vaxxers are absolutely flipping out over Justin Bieber's facial paralysis. Flipping out they are, and it takes a lot of determined effort to hold back the tide of conspiracydom sweeping all over us now. Unfortunately, Dr. Catherine Wallace, aka Dr. Cat, an epidemiologist who debunks anti-vaccine and health-related misinformation on TikTok, there's a lot of it about, especially on TikTok. She says it's quite possible that the COVID has triggered this thing because he caught COVID. We don't know if he was vaccinated. But other people on YouTube are also queuing up to reassure us that he has Ramsay Hunt, not Bell's palsy, which may have been linked to COVID. And he doesn't have that, so as this grinning doctor here reassures us, nothing to worry about, eh? Nothing whatsoever. And when I bring this chart up, I'd like to point out that this is just coincidental. I'm bringing it out now because I know the anti-vaxxers will be all over this kind of material. I feel a sort of an obligation to help defend you as the public and help your rather small mind to think, you see. And so that's my job here, is to help you with the thinky bits, some of the harder thinky bits, you know, like it might be a little bumpy bit where it's just a bit harder thinking. I can just help you over that little hump by pointing out that the fact that the last 22 years of data on herpes, which is what Justin Bieber has, yes, shingles, has a huge spike in 2021 of adverse events reported of shingles, herpes. And that, of course, is a total, complete coincidence. And you should pay no attention to that. Or the anti-vaxxers who are using this chart here as another one of their favourite charts. I'm happy to debunk this stuff. They're saying that the influenza vaccine of years ago, you know, the old technology vaccines, the green bar there, generated hardly any adverse events of shingles and multiple organ dysfunction, whereas recent vaccines, including COVID, generated huge amounts. Again, that's just a complete coincidence. You know, these things ebb and sway over the decades. And similarly, with the number of strokes being reported, another favourite of these anti-vaxxers is to point to the fact that the old flu vaccines hardly generated any stroke data at all as adverse reactions, whereas now in the year of COVID, you have huge increase. Again, you know, coincidental, obviously. And similarly, this graph showing mortality based on how many COVID vaccines you've had or whether you haven't had any, with the green line being people who haven't had any, and mortality increasing as you go up. So with 1, 2, especially third, there seems to be a much higher mortality rate, but that could be, you know, some bus comes around some corner, some guy's not looking where he's going, before you know it, bang, nothing whatsoever to do with the COVID thing at all. So I hope that's helping to reassure you. And indeed, Facial Palsy UK have come out to say currently there's no strong evidence that the number of reported cases of Bell's palsy or Ramsay Hunt syndrome are higher than would be expected in the general population. You see, there's no, well, he didn't say there's no evidence, he said there's no strong evidence, you know, and there isn't, probably. And this stuff here, you wouldn't really call that evidence. That's just coincidence. And this article points out that, you know, the most difficult thing for members of the public to understand is the difference between association and causation. Yeah. Another thing that's difficult for members of the public to understand is how so many people can sell out. And also, they might find it Hard to understand why Facial Palsy UK, speaking out so resolutely on these issues, is medical board is just stuffed with plastic surgeons. Aren't there any members of the public involved here? No, maybe not. It's a bit of a closed shop, you see, when you go to the medical field. And it isn't just Justin Bieber they're coming after, of course. No. FDA fails to do their job. The advisory board of the FDA unanimously voted 22-0 to grant emergency use authorization for Moderna 2-dose series in children ages 6 to 11 years old. Emergency use authorization, no less. Because it's an emergency. Omicron, the dominant variant going around. Okay, there are 0 deaths effectively in children. It doesn't really affect them at all. And there are some very interesting things pointed out to that FDA board by Robert Kennedy's organisation in advance of that panel recommending the 2-dose COVID vaccine. And there was some information in the public domain too, such as this one on Clout.io, Naomi Wolf's website, that 58 babies who received mRNA COVID-19 vaccines suffered life-threatening adverse effects. "58 of these defenseless little creatures. And now they need emergency use authorization. Because there's a huge emergency among babies, as you know, with COVID. Children's Health Defence wrote to the board in advance of the decision and advised them of the dangers of what they were about to do, pointing this out, that there's no COVID emergency for children, that children have a 99.995% recovery rate. Studies show one with 48,000 children showed 0 mortality in children under 18 without comorbidities. Another study in Nature showed there's virtually no risk of death, and even morbidity and injury is low. Most children are already immune, they pointed out to the board. Now, this is a board which is composed of doctors, and I would personally prefer it that if somebody was about to injure a child, they would just go up to the child and strangle them, bash them against a wall and murder them. That's honest. That's honest evil. This is dangerous evil, because obvious evil you see coming. This is dangerous evil. So the members of this board, they all had this pointed out to them, that most children are already immune. 95% of the US population aged 16 and older had developed antibodies against the virus. And there's an increased risk of myocarditis. The risks outweigh the benefits for COVID vaccination in children. The Pfizer trials failed to meet 50% efficacy. In other words, where about even half works, it doesn't even meet that. So why are we doing this? Some children will likely die and others will be permanently injured from these vaccines. Robert Kennedy's organisation pointed out to the members of the board. There's no long-term safety data. Parents will be put under coercive pressure to vaccinate their children. That's against the Nuremberg Code, and you're assisting that by doing this. There's no way of turning this back. You have to first do no harm. You're a physician. You took an oath. You may face liability for this in the long term because willful misconduct may make you liable. If stuff like this is pointed out to you and you go ahead and do this, you may personally be liable. They're safer drugs anyway. And on, 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 and they're still going to come for your babies. 22-0. They're coming for you. They're coming for your babies. This church of evil has to be stopped. Church of Rome and the Church of Medicine were once the same church. Same church. That's why scripts were written in Latin. Because the church doctors came in with the Roman Empire and the official religion of empire. So you got your priest and you got your doctor. And they displaced the traditional knowledge that had existed before. But at least the Church of Rome, despite all the horrible, horrible, horrible damage it did to so many innocents who were abused at the hands of paedophile priests, that pales into insignificance compared to what has been inflicted upon us over the same period of time by the Church of Medicine. God, the evil would only wish that the paedophile evil could approximate the scale of the carnage already wrought by this evil. When something happens to you that is an accident, there's no better place to go than medicine to seek a solution. But when you have something that is not an accident but an illness, the Church of Medicine has now turned into a church of evil. We have a system of food production which is blind deliberately to the consequences of the food it produces. And we have a system of medicine which is blind deliberately to the sources of the problems which it treats, but never cures. And you are caught between the food that's killing and the medicine that's blind and killing even more. And this decision to do this to a generation of children by a medical advisory board, 22-0, not even one person with conscience in there, is something that you should note, because they're coming for your babies. There's many a parent who regrets now that they ever sent their child forward to be an altar boy or server or whatever, because of the harm that was inflicted on their child as a result, and who racked themselves with guilt over the faith they put, blind faith they put, in the religious individual to whom they had entrusted their child to, and who was abused as a result. Well, I'm telling you, there's tears going to be shed in legion in the decades ahead by those who don't see this coming. There is no stopping them now. This is a full-blown religion. It's so bad it almost makes you wish for the old Church of Rome to come back. with its limited scope of evil. Because there is no limit to these people's evil. Justin Bieber's story doesn't matter. That's the story catching the attention. The real story is this story. The real story is the church of medicine and the church of evil. Let the blind lead the blind. But we will protect our innocence, and where they betray we will safeguard, and where they injure we will protect, and where they harm we will cherish, and where they fail we will succeed.